It is time for a sports guest, and not just a sports guest, but a Steelers guest.
This is Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek.
I was all excited for this episode because we were going to interview a real-life play-by-play announcer for an NFL team. And then I found out it was going to be the Steelers play-by-play man.
You're still going to enjoy it. You're still going to have fun. Rob King is an Emmy award-winning sportscaster in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he's covered the Pirates, Penguins, University of Pittsburgh, and West Virginia for almost 25 years. In addition to his television studio work for the Pirates, he just finished his first season as the voice of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Rob also happens to be a 1989 graduate of Washington University in St. Louis. And on top of everything else, he just recently published his very first novel, a young adult novel called The Door in the Stone, which is the first book of a fantasy trilogy. And that book can be found on Amazon. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Thank you. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us, Rob.
One of the other things I found as I was nosing around Google and the internet this morning was that you and I share an award from the Washington University football team. I don't know if you know that. We were both winners of the most inspirational plaque for the Washington University Battling Bears back in the late 80s.
Yeah, we weren't good enough to be MVP.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really all that means.
Exactly.
I don't know what that. I don't remember that. I think I have the. I got a plaque. Did you get a plaque?
I got a plaque with a picture of me on it. I think it was kind of a cool little plaque.
Yeah. I still have that. And then the other one I got was homecoming MVP. So we lost, of course. In those days, WashU lost in football. Quite a bit. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I think we shared that too, because I don't know that they gave the MVP award my freshman year, but I had a good game and we got destroyed. So pretty similar.
Yeah, I had a little statue. I think I don't even know. I'm trying to look up on my bookshelf. It broke, unfortunately. I think I tried to glue it back together. I don't remember if I was successful or not. But we didn't know there was an award. So I remember that I was running off the field and somebody grabbed me and said, "Hey, come on back. You're homecoming MVP." I'm like, I don't even know what that is. We lost. I mean, whatever. So I come back and they finally got me to the table, and everybody in the stands, everybody meaning, all 400 people, were kind of standing around. And just as they introduced me, literally just as they introduced me, and, I'm supposed to say something, they had fireworks that went off behind the stands. And so everybody just turned around and looked at the fireworks. I'm standing there with my trophy, and I was like, all right. And I just jogged off, and that was that. Never said anything. Fun days, though. Fun days, Tom.
My homecoming I guess MVP story, although they didn't give out an award, was that our grandmaster my freshman year was Harold Ramis, and he was like the master of the parade and all that kind of stuff. So at the end of the game, everybody was on the field, and he came onto the field at some point. I didn't see him come onto the field, but somebody tapped me on the shoulder as I was just getting ready to leave, and I turned around, and it was Harold Ramis, and he shook my hand and said, "Nice game." And I was like, we lost by like 3 touchdowns. I was like, "Oh, thanks, man." And that was
cool.
it. Yeah, so that was kind of cool. That was my brush with greatness.
Now, was that your senior year?
That was freshman year.
Oh, okay.
I had not been starting up till that point. I think it was like our 4th game my freshman year. And from that point forward, I started at running back basically for the rest of my career, except for, the 8 or 10 games I was injured throughout my career.
As I recall, your senior year, my junior year, I think our homecoming game was against Hofstra.
It was.
And I don't know who, again, come on, this team's transitioning into 1AA.
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
way better than us. They drubbed us like 56-7, or I don't even know if we got 7. But
I believe we had 7
games. Come on.
Yeah, I think they returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown. We were told later that about 6 or 8 guys on the team were Division I track athletes, which was pretty clear if you watch the game. Yeah, that was horrible. There's a picture of me. I think it was actually in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. It's a profile of me with my helmet on with a giant clump of mud stuck to my face mask, which I think pretty much encapsulated the entire game.
Yeah, I know. I remember there in the second half, it was rainy, and so not only were they just physically superior to your poor Washington University Bears, but it was like miserable conditions, and the field was wet, and their kicker slipped and kicked the ball out of bounds, and their coach just stepped onto the field and started railing this kicker. I mean, like, come on, we're losing 35 to nothing, man. My goodness. We went and played him the next year at Hofstra, and
Oh.
we lost 28-7. I remember I got benched for that game. That's part of why I remember it. And then I came in the second half and threw a touchdown pass. But I also remember being hit into their turf and thinking, ooh, like a blindside sack, and just, face first into the turf with a 260 pounder on me. I was like, ooh, that kind of got a little respect for the quarterbacks getting pounded in the NFL.
Well, speaking of the NFL,
Okay.
you have a very interesting biography, I think. And as I said in the introduction, you are now the voice of the Steelers, which just tickles me to no end because I listen to the Steelers games on Sirius XM just about every week, so I get to hear your voice. But I'm very curious how you got from graduating from Washington University with an English literature major into the world of broadcasting.
Yeah. So I'll try to make this as quick as I can. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was on the 6-year, 5.5 year undergraduate plan, cramming my 4 years of education into those 5.5 years. And so, I really didn't. I took my GREs, and I was thinking about going to business school. And I had some interesting opportunities at the time. In retrospect, they're more interesting. So one of the things, Coach Kinbaum came in and offered me a graduate assistant coaching job. He was the new coach, took over for Ken Woody at WashU. And so I could have gone, and I think the stipend was $2,000, made $2,000, coached, and pursued my master's in business. And of course, at the time, I'm like, well, that sounds like, where do I go with that coaching background and a business degree? Well, now it's every front office person in the NFL. But back then it was nobody. You were a long way from anywhere. And I remember the stories about Dick Vermeil were just out about how he was spending 20 hours a week at the office and burned out. And so that didn't sound like that appealing of a path to me. I didn't want to go to law school. I thought about that because I was eager to get going. I didn't want to accumulate any more debt. And I remember my best friend went to St. Louis University, which is why I transferred to WashU, because I knew somebody out in St. Louis. And he suggested to me, he's like, look, man, all you ever do or talk about revolves around sports. Why don't you get into sports broadcasting? It had never really occurred to me. I wasn't in a house. I didn't grow up in a house that watched a lot of television. If you were, get outside and play. And if you're inside, read a book. That was basically your choices. So I took a class that when I was finishing up my independent study on the letters of the correspondence between Adams and Jefferson. That was my independent study to finish my degree. I took a class at a junior college at Forest Park Community College, and got a little experience. And I got an internship at Channel 11 in St. Louis. And then just when that internship ended, and I was about to have to make a serious decision about what are you going to do next, I didn't have a resume tape, or I wasn't really ready for that. The sports director left, and they offered me, I think I was the assistant sports director first. So I got very lucky. And then from there, it was a matter of just working your way into television. And then like anybody else, working your way up in whatever your chosen profession is.
This is a pretty obscure question, but I've always wondered what's the difference between like doing radio and doing TV as far as maybe describing the action on the field, whether it be sport, whether it be football or baseball.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, Chris, and it's a really I think it's some pretty obvious distinctions for me in the business. Talking about it now, doing it can be sometimes a little different. So the radio person has to describe everything as much as they can, so that the listener feels like they're seeing it. On
Right.
TV, you don't need to say much of anything, really. So I have the same broadcast partner with the Steelers, Craig Wolfley, that I did doing high school football games. So high school football, as Tom knows, is big in Western Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And so we did a game of the week for, probably 10 years. Well, Wolf could finish a story, and he could talk right through the snap of the ball. He didn't very often, but if he had a story to finish, go ahead and finish it. And then I just have to pick it up with Smith off left tackle,
Well, if I
Right.
do that on the radio, you're like, what? What are you talking about? Where's the ball? What, you don't see the score bug with the clock. And so, there are some things that, I think, for example, I've done more radio play-by-play basketball than I've done TV probably, or it's pretty close. Well, I'd done very little radio play-by-play. So I had to make sure of, doing a lot of the little technical things like, where are we in the game? Second quarter, 8:07 remaining, balls at the 42-yard line, Steelers trailing 7-3. Let's make that Steelers leading 7-3.
Hey, how about? Come on. Hey, by the
So-
way, I think I mentioned to you, but you know that you're talking to a Bengals fan on the
I
other
know.
Zoom
Yeah.
screen.
Yeah, if the Steelers are playing the Bengals, Steelers will be leading 21-3. But you can keep going. So.
And Mike Hansen too. Mike Hansen, our old
Yes, right.
teammate Tom. He's a huge Bengals fan, wide receiver. So I think because think about. I've thought about times where I've gotten in the car and I'm driving to the supermarket, and who leaves the football game to drive to the supermarket only because you have to, right? You're like, oh my God,
Right.
I forgot the chips. I mean, how can I survive without the chips for the next 7 hours of TV? So you get in your car and you're driving, and you get back in the car and you're driving home. And if it's, if you're in the car for 5 minutes and you don't know the score and you don't know where the ball is and you don't know what's happened, you might get angry. I know I do as a listener. So there's some like technical things like that. But I mean, a lot of it, I think, is describing what's going on and then remembering to say, Najee Harris running left. And it's in TV, you don't have to say that. And so I think those are some of the adjustments that I was kind of working through over the course of the year, because there definitely are some differences. I will tell you this. I think probably most people would tell you that radio is more fun. Television's more lucrative, but radio is more fun to do.
Huh.
Cool.
Now, the fact that you work with a partner intrigues me only because, Chris and I have basically been doing this for a year. And as you've already noticed, we still manage to talk over each other on a pretty regular basis. How do you find that to be difficult with Craig Wolfley? I know you said you worked with him for quite a while, so maybe it's a little more natural, but or do you have signals? Do you have ways to make sure the other guy knows you have something you need to say?
Not really. I mean, we've worked together for a long time, and there's the producers, so we have two people on the sideline. We have Max Starks and we have Missy Matthews. And so the producer will decide, Dan Quinlan will decide, okay, when are we going to Missy? When are we going to Max? We have some meetings to try to set up a couple things beforehand, but most of the time, once the game starts and you sort of outlined it, Missy always comes in with, a reef of story ideas. So TJ Watt gets a sack. He sacks Joe Burrow. Sorry, Chris. And now Missy's got a stat, right? Or something that she can add. And then Max will have a feel for the game. But no, I mean, it happens. Look, it's like the two of you guys talking. You're human beings. I mean, you're going to talk over each other. I always encourage Wolf to just, hey, finish your thought. Don't worry about it. I'll catch up. But I also encourage him that, hey, or anybody would say, discussions we had, I need a little more time than I needed in TV because you need to set up, I think you need to set up the formation. And like, again, you don't need to see, if I'm doing a football game, I don't need to see, say, 3 receivers to the right, everyone can see it. So just things like that. But the big thing and the great thing about that crew is there are no egos, zero. And so nobody's trying to get their licks in. Nobody's looking for a different job or using this as a resume tape. That's important too. You have to have good people, I think. I mean, can you have a good broadcast and have people that don't like each other, don't get along? I suppose you can, but that's never been my experience, and it would not be a working atmosphere I'd want. So it starts with Wolf just being an unbelievably great human being, and then we kind of go from there.
All right, another more sort of behind the scenes question for you, Rob. I always wondered, how do you it's one thing to watch the NFL, you see number 22, as Najee Harris for your Steelers. Like when you're doing a high school game, how do you so quickly identify the name of the players? Like what sort of cheat sheets do you all work from? And probably college too, or hell, if you have some guy that just came up off the practice squad for the Bengals starting,
Yeah, I mean, that happened this year. Luckily all the play-by-play guys are really good. Because we're all in the same boat. We've all done this before. and I was watching a game, and I for some reason I wasn't aware that the Bengals had called somebody up. I don't know if I didn't get a notification or was busy doing other prep work, but I'm watching the teams. I always watch teams warm up, and I'm like, oh, who's 87? And so I went in the next room, and they're like, oh, he just got called up from the practice. Oh, thank goodness.
Oh, that's cool.
That has happened, but for me, and the way I try to explain this to students when I'm talking to them is that it needs to be memorized like a second language. And so I don't want to bore you. I love it. I love every aspect of the job. But I have no problem, and I enjoy memorizing rosters. So when I did high school football games, I would call the coaches up on Saturday. They would be Friday games. I'd say, hey, congratulations on your win. Now, who's your starters? Now, usually in the week before, if we had some tape of those teams, while I was studying for the current opponent, I would look at the next week's opponent, just do a little cheat sheet. Okay, here are the guys that look like they're playing. I'm going to forget that. I'm going to get their rosters. Then on Saturday, I'm going to call the coaches and start the process for the next week. And then it's just memorizing. It's going to bed with rosters. I probably do less reading. I usually have to read to go to sleep. I'm one of those people. I need to shut my mind off. And a lot of times I'm shutting it off with memorization. And what I tell students is you can't go to a sheet. You can't. I mean, yes, we all have sheets in front of us. They're all moments in which you don't see what's going on. So a spotter might point out, hey, that was 56 that made tackle. Okay, so Highsmith makes the tackle. I'm following the ball. I see the game a little differently as a play-by-play guy as I do as a fan. But if you're speaking a foreign language, you can't be, hey, what's the word for that? It's too late.
Right.
You need to have it. It needs to be, if somebody says, 51, you say Herbert, it has to be instantaneous. So it's just memorize. It's just rote, really. It's just memorization, and it's just time. That's all it is. Just putting your time into it. That's it.
When you're on the radio, do you have someone in your ear? Do you have an earpiece in, or are you working from a computer screen when you talk about spotters or just telling you what's coming next or what may happen? How are you aware of what those things are going like through the course of the game?
So I have headsets on, and that's the producer can talk to us through the headsets. And obviously Wolf and I can hear each other, and I can hear Max and I can hear Missy through the headsets. I do let me see if I think I've got a chart here somewhere. I'm an old fashioned guy. I can't help it. So I don't know if you're going to be able to see this or not. So I go hand. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm a handwritten guy. I had one of the announcers tell me, hey, listen, we can put this on a computer. And I'm just first of all, I'm not very handy with computers. I've never seen a piece of paper or a manila folder not have Wi-Fi. So I feel comfortable with it. And for me, it is the last or second to last part of the memorization and the preparation. So I write the things down by hand, then I go back over and, put them in magic marker. And as I'm doing that, I think there, a lot of studies have shown that writing is better, probably, especially for our generation, than typing for memorization. So I like it, and I enjoy doing it. I don't have any problem taking a couple hours every week. People have told me, look, you can do this computer program in 5 minutes. Well, I can, but now it's a computer program. It's been typed in or whatever, and not something that I've written in and notes that I've So you take your notes and you transcribe them onto a piece of paper. That's what I do, and then I put them onto my charts. And I think every time you go through that process, your ability to remember those things is heightened.
That's interesting. That's very similar to how I handle things. If I've got a trial, I'm getting ready for a trial. I tend to handwrite everything out. And again, there are so many forms of software that lawyers can use now to organize for that kind of thing. But if I do it that way, I tend not to remember those things that I need to remember at the moment it comes up. It's
right.
It's funny, and I get it. I'm sure, as you said, it's generational. I'm sure the guys that are younger than us won't need to do that stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yep, no problem. As a fan, I just wanted to make this comment. I've been listening, as I said, I live in the Chicago area, so when I listen to the Steelers on radio, it's through Sirius XM, and we don't get every Steelers game on TV, so I listen fairly often every season, and I've been listening to Bill Hillgrove. I've been listening to him for a decade or more as the play-by-play guy for the Steelers, and I got to tell you, and I know Wolfley worked with him as well.
Yeah.
So there was that consistency that went across, but I will tell you that I feel a pretty seamless transition into this season.
I appreciate that.
So,
Well, Bill's a wonderful guy. He's not fully retired because he's still doing Pitt. He's still doing Pitt football and basketball. I told him when he retired, if he could leave me his voice, I'd be perfectly happy. He's just got a
yes.
that voice of his. It's just, it's another level, man. It's a great voice. But thank you, Tom. And it's been an absolute blast. I mean, I've just had so much fun doing the games.
It sounds that way. It sounds like you get along real well with Wolfley, as I said, and I thought it was a lot of fun hearing you, and even hearing you occasionally in snippets as my sons and I have been watching the HBO show, the Hard Knocks.
Oh yeah,
show,
Hard Knocks. Yeah,
about AFC North. Every once in a while, your voice will come up. I'll be like, hey guys, you know who that is? And they're like, yeah, we know. We've already told them.
All right. So one last question for you. So growing up, Tom and I talked about this yesterday. Radio was everything. Like I listened to Cincinnati Reds games, like every single one. And I remember like Joe Nuxall, this shows how old I am. His closing catchphrase was, "This is the old left-hander rounding third and heading for home." To this day, I remember that and I can hear it. All those guys that have sort of taken on a name and well known in the business seem to have a catchphrase. How much effort goes into that? And do you have any sort of key calls that are distinctive? And
I don't, although I was encouraged to midway through the season. I think people were letting me kind of find my rhythm, and I was grateful for that. And you go back and you're listening to yourself doing games and stuff. A guy who I really, really trust, who I think is phenomenal, and I've worked with him in the last couple of years, a radio guy by the name of Brian LaMartina, suggested, look, you should call your touchdowns the same way. When the Steelers score a touchdown, and you could call it whatever you want. I mean, and again, it's not a catchphrase, but it's, touchdown Pittsburgh Steelers or Pittsburgh Steelers touchdown or however you want to call it. So that made sense to me because I think sometimes some of the catchphrases can get a little self-serving, but you also have to understand that it gives the fans another feeling that they're part of it.
Yeah.
The Steelers do this now. The first time I saw it was at a K-State football game that I went to just for the fun of it, Kansas State. And, they'd get a first down and the announcer would say, "That's good for a Kansas State." And everybody would stand up and go, "First down," So there's some value to doing that. And, I'm resistant and hesitant to being, I don't want to do things by rote. I don't want to, fall back on catchphrases. Sometimes I think that's, I waffle back and forth between, hey, is that intellectual laziness or is that self-serving? Is it something that the fans are really going to enjoy? And so I think that's something that I'm working through, but I don't think I'll ever have anything quite that distinctive. It would probably just be the touchdown call. And it's so the fans can be part of it. Really, that's the reason to do it.
Yeah, and I was an advocate because some of them are pretty cheesy. Like,
oh no, but I think they're great. Believe me. And I think if they occurred organically or occurred naturally, that might be something different, Chris. So I don't want to force that. If it happens in the next, knock on wood, many years. Sure. But I don't want to sit here and be, in my office and be thinking, well, I wonder if I should say this or something, although I did, when Russell Wilson scored a touchdown this year, he ran it in. I did say 1 2-step, 3 in for 6, because 1 2-step is a song by Sierra, his wife. So
Nice.
I did throw that in there, although I don't know if anybody noticed it. It didn't make Hard Knocks, I know that much. Our producer was like, "Hey man, they cut your call out of Hard Knocks." Whatever, So, but that one I did kind of rattle in the back of my mind because I was listening to some of her music. I'm not a big R&B guy. I do. I mean, it's not that I don't like it, but it's not my go-to music. But I listened to some of her music, and when they signed Russell Wilson, I'm like, oh yeah, and I was like, oh, I really like that song in particular, and it was 1 2-step. So anyway,
that's
there you have
it. Well, I'd like to turn our discussion briefly to the fact that not only are you an award-winning sportscaster, but this year you released your very first novel, which in some ways I may be even more jealous of than the sportscasting side of things. Early this year, I guess middle of this year, you released the the book, The Door and the Stone, which
Yeah.
is the first book, planned book of a trilogy of
Right.
young adult novels that are set in a fantasy world, kind of another dimension, I guess would be the best way to put it. It has two young protagonists, I guess, teen or preteen, a brother and a sister. And I've read the book. I read it when I saw that it had come out, and I loved it. I thought it was really, really good. Great book.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So it's more, and again, I don't know if there's anybody out there that would care about the distinction. So it's more middle grade than YA. So it took me 9 years to write it, and that was one of the things that I had to do at the very beginning. Now that you mentioned it, I hadn't thought about this in a while, but I wrote it. It was originally called 9 years ago. It was called The Old Man in the Forest, and I was waffling back and forth between those age grades, and somebody told me, look, it's either one or the other. You can't have it be both. And so YA is more, angst, and you get a little bit of love and maybe not sex, probably. I don't know, maybe you do.
Romance, though.
Romance, yeah.
Yeah.
So I didn't want that really. And so I edited all that out of the book. I released it just before Thanksgiving. I wanted to release it over the summer, and then I got the Steelers job, so that kind of put that on hold, which was a wonderful way to put a project on hold.
Sure.
And so I put it out just before Thanksgiving, and it has been an absolute joy to write. And I hope that kids will read it. I was an English literature major, and Chris, I think I told this story to Tom, but when I was a kid, outside and play. If you're inside, you read a book, as I mentioned earlier. So for me, it was like, every Hardy Boys book. Not only every Hardy Boys book, but they're different. Some were written in the 20s, some were written in the 50s, some were written in the 70s. I read them all. I read The Missing Chums, like in 3 different editions, and whatever sports book I could get my hands on. And some of them were histories, and some of them were biographies. I mean, I read a biography of Jackie Jensen, Rocky Calavito. I mean, not Hall of Famers exactly. And so this teacher, 1 year, I think it was my 4th grade year, we read a series by a guy named Lloyd Alexander, the Pride Ain series. And I really liked it. And then my teacher the next year said, look, read more of these books, or read something other than, I appreciate the fact you read, you're always ready to do a book report, but branch out a little bit. And so I did. I finished reading that Pride Ain series. I read C.S. Lewis. Probably, let me see here. If I took you up here onto my bookshelf, you would see amidst the autographed baseballs. There they are. There's Lloyd Alexander, and there's C.S. Lewis. There's Ursula K. Le Guin, and there's some boring stuff by like F. Scott Fitzgerald and other people. Dashiell Hammett. I still like a good detective book. I'll still read anything I can get my hands on as detective books. But so that kind of changed the way I read, and that's why I wanted to write it for that age group, because those books are still important to me. I mean, not that I read them all the time, but every 5 or 6 years I'll rip through the Pride Ain series in about 4 days, and we'll enjoy it. So that's kind of why I wrote the book.
Did you had you been a reader of kind of sword and sorcery fantasy type of books prior to writing this particular one?
I mean, it's a genre I enjoy. I enjoy lots of, I enjoy lots of different reading. I mean, frankly, it is, CIA detective books, but I'll read, of course I read after 5th and 6th grade, I read all the, J.R. Tolkien books and some other people. I don't read a ton of current fantasy. There is a series by a guy named Joe Abercrombie called The First Law that is just tremendous. And I read the Door in the Stone, or not the Door in the Stone. Sorry, that's me. Patrick Rothfuss wrote the book. I think he's got a book coming out, something about the stone, or something about a door. It might be called Doors of Stone. I think it is actually. But he hasn't released his 3rd book yet. I read the first 2 of his series, and George R.R. Martin. I read, had I known that. So my son was after me to read the book, the Game of Thrones, and I finally read it. I was like, look, man, I don't want to read a lot of these fantasy books are like,
Martin especially.
Yeah, they're just huge, thick books. And so I got about halfway through it, and I was like, "Man, this is really good. Thanks for giving this to me." He goes, "Well, you'll love the next four." And I was like, "Whoa!" I thought there was one, and I did. I loved the next four too, and I read them, and just like everybody else, I'm like, "Where's the next one? When's it coming out?" So, yeah. So I'll read some of that, but I read, it's one genre, it's one I enjoy, and I went and read. There are authors that write in this age group. There's a woman named Kelly Barnhill. I think to myself, if I could be as good a broadcaster as Mike Tirico and as good a writer as Kelly Barnhill, I'd be a pretty happy guy. She's terrific. So I've read a couple of her books. But yeah, you try to stay a little bit current with what's going on.
Well, one of the things about genre writing that I appreciate is that regardless of the genre, there's a structure, right? That's the whole idea behind a genre is you have an idea of what you're going to start with only because you're writing within a particular genre. And then the question is, what does the author do within that genre? And, to try to avoid it being predictable, to avoid it kind of sounding like other writers. And that was my feeling about your book, was that although there are certain things, the suddenly finding yourself in a whole new world, that's a whole subgenre in itself when it comes to fantasy novels. But what you did with the characters, the relationships I think that you created between the two siblings that are the travelers in this particular book, and then the people that they run across, I thought you did a really, really good job of making it original within a genre that frankly can get stale sometimes because so many people have written so many books. But I really enjoyed it, and I was telling Chris how much I enjoyed the book and how original I thought it was, and how much I was looking forward to the next
one. Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I just didn't want it to be the same, and like you said, there's certain, structures that you're going to remain within. And then within that structure, can you do something that's hopefully a little bit different? And so I did try to do that. Thank you. You try to make the characters a little bit different, and you try to make them believable. So yeah, that was important to me, and I'm glad that I'm glad you felt that way, and I'm really glad you liked it. So
absolutely.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very gratifying. Thank you.
And the last thing I'll say, go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
I was just going to be self-deprecating like I always am. So unlike Tom, who read the book ahead of time, and you who prepare for every game by memorizing the roster, I haven't read your book yet, but it's in my queue. I have 2 books from favorite authors, then you're next. So even though I didn't read it yet, I will give the plug. This will be on our website as well. So if our listeners want to check out Rob's website, it's robkingauthor.com. And on our website, we'll also put a link to the book on Amazon.
So the next part of our podcast, the first segment we're going to get into is creating a special playlist. We asked you to come up with a theme that we could all choose some songs around. We'll put together a playlist based upon our selections and put that out on Spotify, Amazon, YouTube Music, etc. And probably not a big surprise in this particular case, but the theme that you suggested to us was sports. What I liked about that is we could take any number of approaches to it, and I don't think any of the three of us talked to each other about what we were going to do. But we're going to alternate our choices. And Rob, what's your first choice for this playlist?
As I recall, since I don't have the playlist in front of me, but first is Hurricane by Bob Dylan. I believe it was the first one I chose. Kind of an obvious one. It seems like there's a lot of, I think, a lot of songs written about boxing. As that, those certainly came to my mind, and I'll be interested to see if you guys have some of the other ones that I was thinking about. But great song by Bob Dylan. A protest song that Reuben Hurricane Carter had been incarcerated wrongly. I think he was finally let out of jail, and I think exonerated from the charges. I think the song reinstituted another trial for him, and I think he was found guilty again. But then I think he was finally let loose and exonerated. But a great long song, but a great song. Has some awesome Bob Dylan rhymes like saw 2 men running out. They looked like middleweights, jumped into a white car with out-of-state plates. I mean, come on. How good is that? So big fan of that song, Hurricane by Bob Dylan.
My favorite Bob Dylan song. And as a matter of fact, you stole that from under me. And I think, actually, Chris, you may have been thinking about that one too, if I'm not mistaken.
I was. And then since Rob took all the good songs in that area. I went in a totally different direction. I went with songs that you might hear at a sports event. And my first choice is one that I hear. I go to Duke, or I work at Duke now.
Mhm.
Previously, I worked at UNC, and I grew up hating Duke. And if it's one of those, like when Deion Sanders played for the Reds, I loved Deion Sanders. When he didn't play for the Reds, I hated Deion Sanders. So the Duke student section is something to behold. I've gone to a couple basketball games, and
Oh,
one of the coolest things that they do, other than taunting the players on the other team, is a song by, oh crap, I forgot to put it in. What's her damn name? Every Time We Touch. I'm gonna have to add that. Look that up, Tom. It's
You
an
got it.
R&B type song. Starts out real slow, and then it starts to pick up, and you can just watch the entire student section just bouncing. And it's not a typical like rah-rah song. It's a very interesting. Like when I first started playing, I'm like, where are they going with this? And now even at football games, Duke's done actually turned around a little bit in football. Got a pretty decent sized student section, and they do the same thing. It's you have to check it out. But as the song picks up, I think Duke pumps in some background noise to the bouncy part of the song. It's a great song.
I got to say, a basketball game at Cameron Indoor, football game at Lambeau. I
Yes.
mean, I've been to a lot of, there's some college football stadiums I want to go to as well, but I think those are the top two on my list. I think I'd love to go to a game there, and I'd love to go to I can't wait for the Steelers to play in Green Bay so I can get to do a game at Lambeau.
Cascada, Chris?
Yep, that's it. Sorry.
Cascada.
And again, I don't even know who that artist is.
Yeah,
I
me
barely
either.
knew the song, but now having worked at Duke for 8 years, gone to a couple sporting events. That's one of my favorite events during the game itself.
I'll bet.
So
That's cool.
Yep.
So interestingly, and this does not happen very often when we start with a blank slate and a theme, Chris and I kind of went the same route in terms of songs we picked, although we didn't pick the same songs at all. I will tell you that I almost picked the Steelers polka as my first
Oh, that would have
song.
been a great song.
I
Good
love that
call.
song. It's my ringtone from August through unfortunately only through early January these days.
I love it.
But I almost picked that as my first song. Instead, I also went with psych songs you hear in stadiums. And the ones I picked are really connected to specific teams. And the first one is Chelsea Dagger from Costello Music by the Fratellis. That is a Blackhawks song. If you go to the stadium and see the Blackhawks play, you will hear that song, I don't know, 10, 15 times. I feel like they play it at least 3 times every period. Came out in 2006, and it's a great, the part they play is just kind of the really upbeat, really loud, staccato part of the song. But if you listen to the song all the way through, it's actually a really cool song, which I didn't realize for about 10 years because I never listened to the whole song. But anyway, my pick, that'll be the third song on the list, is Chelsea Dagger from Costello Music.
Oh, the third song in.
Third song in. There you go. See?
All right.
What's your next pick, Rob?
Do you have it in front of you?
You picked another. You stole yet another song from me, which is America's Favorite Pastime.
Oh, yeah,
by Todd Snyder.
Yeah. So I saw him open up for John Prine. He was one of the rare people in which I was kind of on him at the beginning. Usually I'm like 8 years behind everybody else. Like, hey, these Pearl Jam guys, these guys are pretty good. So I completely lost track of him. I think his first album might have been Songs for a Daily Planet, and I had the album, and it was great. I really loved it. The Black Crowes are another band like that for me. I really loved the early Black Crowes. I finally saw them in concert this year. Todd Snyder opened up for John Prine. I'm like, this is great. And then he played that song, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a song about Doc Ellis, who I'd interviewed about that incident.
Shit.
Oh yeah. He was an interesting guy. So he told me the whole story. Told me he'd been drinking when he gave up the home run in the 1971 All-Star game to Reggie Jackson. He said everybody said he hit it out of the ballpark. He didn't hit it out of the ballpark. It hit the light tower and bounced back in. Okay, Doc. He was a beautiful human being, Doc Ellis. Just great storyteller, a real brightness to him. And, back in the day, partied too much. I think I don't know if that was a cause of his passing away, but great storyteller. So he told me that story. So when I heard Todd Snyder, and it was very quiet, hushed. It's a folk country. You got to be quiet. And I was like, wow, man, that song's about Doc Ellis. That's great, So yeah, that had to go on my list.
That's it. Listeners to this podcast know Todd Snyder is my number one artist. I talk about
Really?
him practically every episode. So
Oh,
if
that's
you go
awesome.
back, in fact, my recommendation for we gave some end of year awards out at the end of last season, and he's got a whole set of what they call Purple Building albums, where he re-recorded every single album, including songs for Daily Planet, acoustic, just him and a guitar, and he tells stories about the making of the album and all of the songs. You should go listen. It's fantastic.
That sounds fabulous. That sounds great.
So, but that's why you stole that one from me, because that's the first sports song I think of, actually.
If I'd known he was your guy, I wouldn't have taken it.
Chris?
So another psych song, like Tom said. And this one's funny because the song that they play at the games is actually the White Stripes version of Seven Nation Army, which once you hear it, you'll know the song. But I know how rap artists will sample songs. Well, this is a flat out, just stealing the entire sound of the song. It's by a band that I don't know all that well, but it's a very dirty version. It's called "It Takes a Seven Nation Army to Hold Us Back" by Apathy. So I'll go to like high school football games and they'll play the White Stripes version, and all I hear is the less than, non-suitable for work lyrics from Apathy. Let me find a quick one real quick. But you know what? Just listen to it. Probably shouldn't say some of the words on here.
Well, I love the White Stripes version. I haven't heard the other one, so
you should listen to it. It's really funny. It's funny and it's catchy, and you'll never think of the White Stripes version the same again.
Cool. Well, my pick, which is number 6 on this playlist, is another psych song. About 3 years ago, I was forced by my boys to pick my favorite English Premier League team, because we were all going to root for a team, and my son Jake already had one. So I did a little bit of research, and to be fair, they weren't as good as they are now, but I chose Liverpool as the team I wanted to root for, primarily because of the Beatles at that time. Turns out it was a pretty good choice anyway. But one of the things that I found now that I've watched a lot of Premier League with the boys is how every team has a song that they play. Usually at the end of the game, sometimes at the beginning of the game as well. And everybody in the stands sings along with the song. And what I thought was interesting about that was it's not like it's not like the Steelers polka or something like that. They tend to pick fairly contemporary songs. And in the case of Liverpool, they sing "You'll Never Walk Alone," which doesn't strike me as a psych song, but the crowd goes crazy and they all sing it together, and it's really kind of cool. So my pick is "You'll Never Walk Alone" from the album "How Do You Like It" by Jerry and the Pacemakers. So I say contemporary. It came out in 1963, but still, it's weird to me that they pick a pop song to be their music. But the whole crowd sings it, and it's really kind of cool. It's worth waiting to the end of the game, win or lose, to see the crowd all stand and sway and sing the song.
Very cool.
All right, Rob, I'll throw you your third pick. You picked Sawchuck by Ron Hines.
Oh, yeah. So it's a song about the goaltender, Terry Sawchuck, and it is, I don't really know Ron Hines. I believe he's Canadian. I don't know much of his music, but I heard it on, the local alternative, station that plays, not the traditional rock and roll stuff, and WYEP here in Pittsburgh. And it's a great song. And it talks about his career. It's, I'd call it Americana, but I think it's Canadian, so I don't know if it's Canadiacana. But it's a wonderful song, great song if you have an opportunity to check it out.
All right, Chris, your final song for the playlist is?
Yes, and it's a nice segue, but I did want to choose Zamboni, but I think, Tom, you've already chosen that for a previous episode by the Gear Daddies. So I'm not going to choose that one because it's been taken. So instead, I'm going with what will be my walk-up song when I finally make it to the majors. Going with "Are You Ready" by Disturbed. The opening of that song is so perfect for a walk-up song. It's just like heavy rock, heavy metal almost. Are you ready? Get up, get up. And then they repeat that over and over again. And then they get into the rest of the song. But those first like 30 seconds are ideal for when I walk up and strike out the first time in the major leagues. So
Nice.
Love it.
I did not think about a walk-up song actually, but my last pick for this playlist is going to be no surprise to Rob. It's Renegade from Pieces of Eight.
Very nice.
By
Very
Styx.
nice.
That, again, if there's a song a pop song that a fan base has attached itself to, it's the Steelers and Renegade. I haven't been to a Steelers game in Pittsburgh for probably over 25 years. The last, we'll put it this way, the last Steelers game I went to was at Three Rivers Stadium. So count however many years that is. So I've not been, they didn't play Renegade when I was there way back then. And they certainly don't play Renegade for the Steelers when I go see them play away, like in Indianapolis or Kansas City.
No.
But it is cool to see the crowd, even on TV, to see the crowd go crazy as soon as that song comes on. So it's from the album Piece of Eight in 1978. I'm picking Renegade by Styx.
You know, if you can find it on the Steelers website, Nate Hogan and the crew there, they do these long features, and there's one on Renegade. It's fabulous. I think it came out last year.
Yeah.
And he's like Joey. They interviewed Joey Porter, and he's like, "Yeah, I thought it was called Oh Mama." You know, like none of the players really knew what it was, but they wound up loving the song. That's a great selection. Well done. And my final one was, so I was thinking there's a couple other songs that came to my mind. By the way, "The Boxer" by Simon and Garfunkel, and there's a song that Mark Knopfler did about Sonny Liston that came out several years ago. That might be worth checking out. But I did "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." You know, I was going to come up with the writer. I don't know if you ever seen that WKRP version. Do you ever remember the show WKRP in Cincinnati?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And
Big time.
they put
Yeah.
together the spliced playlist of 5 songs, and it's supposed to win $10, but Johnny Fever makes a mistake and it's $1,000. He forgets so they splice these songs together, and the last one is it's like so it might be like 3 or 4 rock songs, and the last one is the national anthem, and it's just like one song, just like one chord, and so the guy calls up and says Star Spangled Banner by Francis Scott Key, which is kind of funny. So I was gonna come up with a writer of Take Me Out to the Ball Game, but I didn't do it. It's just obviously ubiquitous, and I love baseball, and it's sung at every game, and it's a song that survived a long time and remains relevant.
Yeah.
So that's my last choice.
That's a good finisher, I think. Nice, strong finisher. Chris always accuses me of coming up with alternates. I will tell you, I thought about the Boxer, except I was going to suggest the Mumford and Sons version, which is really a cool version.
I haven't heard that.
Yeah, you should listen. I love the Simon and Garfunkel version. Really, it's one of my favorite songs by them. But Mumford and Sons is just as good, and it's just different enough to make it their own. And then I also happen to have an album in my collection that is all songs sung by Muhammad Ali.
Really?
And somebody wrote him a song called "I Am the Greatest," and when he sings it, it's just it's just classic Ali. It's when he was at the top of his game. And it's just so funny to hear him sing and rhyme. And hell, he probably wrote the lyrics because he used it. It's a very simple rhyming song.
So I'm surprised y'all didn't go with "We Are Family" from the Pirates back in the day. And I wanted to go with "Welcome to the Jungle" because they've been calling it the Jungle at least as long as that song. But it's such a cliched song, and every stadium I think plays it. But the Bengals have gotten good since I moved away. Let's go with decent. They used to have fairly empty stadiums. To build a new stadium, they pack it, and it's a pretty good experience from what I understand. So, like Tom, I've not gone since the previous stadium. So,
well, you guys didn't go Gary Glitter either. So you guys went a different way, right? You guys went the song, and I thought about that, but so I stayed very much between the lines with my selections. Songs about sports. Yeah,
songs about sports. This will be a good playlist. We're going to put it out separate from our regular playlist, what we call a regular playlist. It will be under the umbrella of a third song in playlist. Haven't quite come up with the title yet. That usually comes to me at the last minute. But we will post those 10 songs on Spotify, on Apple Music, on YouTube Music, and Amazon Music. And we urge everybody to go listen to them. We'll post them in the order that we picked them, and let us know what you think. We would both really like to thank you, but Rob, I know you have a busy schedule, and there's a lot going on. I wish you good luck with your book. I don't think I've said on the air, but the last episode, I think, so one of the segments we do is what we call staff picks. And one of my staff picks in the last episode or two was your book. It was right after I finished it. So we're going to continue to plug that book. I think it's great. Please let me know. I want to know as soon as the next one's ready, because I'm ready to read it. And we will post links to everything Rob King on our website, which is thirdsonginpodcast.com. So I can't thank you enough for being on the episode.
Guys, thank you very much. Thanks for the pick, Tom, and thanks for reading the book. And I know Chris is going to be reading it soon too, so thanks in advance, Chris. Yes, you guys are the best, man. Thanks very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
So I can't thank Rob enough for showing up. He's got a lot going on right now, and it was really nice to talk to a fellow WashU grad about all the interesting things he's done. That does, however, take us to our recommendations, our pop culture recommendations for this episode. And for this season, we are picking our favorite pop culture from the 90s. And this being the third episode of Third Song In, we're both making recommendations from 1993.
Yes, we are. And I'll go ahead and start off. You might not be surprised by my choice. 1993, the band Morphine released what I think is their best album, Cure for Pain. I listened to it in its entirety yesterday when I was walking, and it holds up to this day. It's, Morphine, I think, is possibly a bit of an acquired taste. It's basically just Mark Sandman and a two-string bass. Dana Colley, who's a fantastic saxophonist, sometimes would play two. Just from start to finish, two at the same time. From start to finish, the album is strong, and I was reminded of that yesterday. It starts with this sort of almost melancholy piece that's about 30 seconds, which is Dana Colley on a sax, and then it breaks into the second song, which is almost speaking to the audience. It's called Buena. Just Mark Sandman coming in with his bass and laying it down hard. He's got one of the best voices, unfortunately passed away. And then I'll end with the third song in, which is my favorite, which is entitled I'm Free Now. And it's all about, I think he's broken in a screwed up relationship and he's free now. And he's talking about his ability to do whatever he wants. And it's about, basically fucking up is the theme of that. It's like, I'm free, but what am I free to do now? Great song. I think it represents Morphine's sound better than any other album that they have. You start to see some of the stuff they did later in their career, which was more almost like musical poetry. There's a song at the end called Sheila, which is a little odd. So the glimpses of that. I like the earlier stuff where he's jamming. And I think one of the cool things is how they leverage Dana Colley's sax. There's one song, I think it was on I'm Free Now, where he sings the lyrics, Mark Sandman, and the sax is almost singing with him. Like you can hear the syllables and how he echoes what he sings. And then later in the song, it's used differently. It's almost to create the feelings that Mark Sandman is singing about. So if you can listen to not only the lyrics, which I tend to focus on more, but what the sax is saying in the background, some really powerful stuff. So I went with Morphine's Cure for Pain.
Yeah, that is a fantastic album. I was not aware of that band until you started listening to them some long time ago. I agree with you. He has this ability to kind of weave in instruments that aren't necessarily part of kind of the alternative rock genre all the time. The saxophone is what you hear with Morphine, and I really do. I love that album. I know, what was the other band where he would use harmonica in the same way?
Yeah, Treat Her Right.
Treat Her Right. Yeah, he just had that ability to take different instrumentation and really make unique music out of it. That was still, it was still rock. It was still alternative rock as far as I'm concerned. was also all the songs are just fucking sad as hell. So
Yeah.
my recommendation from 1993 is probably one of my top 10 albums ever, which is August and Everything After by Counting Crows. This one may be a little tough for you to swallow, only because it was such a popular album. At the time, it was ubiquitous. Even I got tired of listening to Counting Crows for a year or two after 93, just because it was constantly on the radio. But man, if you listen to that album, there's not a bad song on it. And it is just, it's so unique. And that comes from, his voice as much as anything else. Duritz has a way of singing and phrasing. It reminds me of Bob Dylan in a way, and it reminds me of Van Morrison in a way. They use their voice as an instrument and don't ever quite sing the way you would expect a verse to be sung until you hear him sing it, and then that's the only way you can imagine that verse being sung. And I think August and Everything After was their debut album, and they made many, frankly, at least another half dozen great albums, in my opinion. But that one really holds up, and I listen to it still all the time. One of my favorite songs is one of the songs that for a while I couldn't listen to because it was on the radio constantly, which is Mr. Jones, which was the third song in. You heard it all the time, but god damn, is that a great song, and is it really it's just a fantastic album. So that was a fun one to recommend for this one.
Yeah, and I don't disagree that I rebelled against it when it was popular, because it was so damn popular. And
Yeah.
But I always kept it in my collection. I had it, and then went back and listened later because, like you said, it's like with Morphine. I mean, I think they were a unique sound. They did something a little different, and that needed to be appreciated. And I went back, and I've always appreciated them. I just got a little tired of hearing the same songs. But Mr. Jones is an awesome song, despite the fact that you couldn't turn on the radio back then without it being played.
Yeah, it almost feels like they just, Counting Crows caught a wave that Morphine didn't, because they were very unusual. It wasn't your standard pop music for that time period, but they just caught the world's attention in a way that I don't think Morphine ever did. And he wrote it out pretty well, truthfully. Like I said, he still cranked out some great music. There's a good 4 or 5 other albums of theirs that I could recommend and may in the future. But even I got tired of listening to his voice and listening to Mr. Jones all the time.
So that brings us to Post Facto.
It's a mistake. It's a mistake.
Post Facto is where Tom and I will correct mistakes from a previous episode, finish unfinished thoughts, or answer unanswered questions. And each of us has one from the last episode. So in the last episode, I talked about Happy Days because we were talking about jumping the shark. When we referenced Mork from Mork's visit to Happy Days, and Tom asked me how did they explain that Mork traveled to the 50s, which is the time setting for Happy Days, and then I guess it was probably the 80s for the show Mork from Mork. I actually did a lot of research on this, and it's kind of mixed. So first off, a lot of people online said that if it hadn't been called Jumping the Shark, it would have been called When Mork Visited, because it was also just really going in a bizarre direction. But one of the explanations is that it was only a dream, because Mork visits, everyone in the show is frozen in time. Only Richie is walking around. He's supposed to explain humans to Mork. He then wakes up, the doorbell rings again, he goes to the door, and it's Robin Williams, but in a different character. So the suggestion is it was all a dream. That's one explanation. But there's another one where I think maybe Mork came back to the show and makes a comment, which I found to be funny, is he's traveled to the future where both the cars and the women are faster, which I thought was a funny line. So I do think that because they purposely were vague about his powers as an alien. So I think time travel is certainly within the realm of what he would have been able to accomplish. So that's what I got.
Nice. I didn't know about that time travel comment, so that makes perfect sense then.
Yeah.
All right, my post facto is only to circle back to the book that I recommended last episode as part of our staff picks, and that was The Ministry of Time by Kaylee Ann Bradley. I was 95% done with the book when we recorded, and I believe I finished it that night. It is outstanding. If we were still giving ratings, and I don't think we are anymore, I'd give it 4 out of 5 egg burritos. I really loved it. I am gonna. Again, I'm not sure if that was her very first novel. I think she may have written a novel before that, but I'm going to keep my eye out for her. It's a time travel romance, so it's kind of one of those genre things where there's kind of a certain structure that I think that she used to write the book. But there are a lot of twists, and the relationships between the characters are really interesting. And she has an afterword to the book where she talks a little bit about where she came up from the idea, which was basically doing some research about an officer in the British Navy back in the I think he was 18, or maybe he was 1770 something. And there was very limited information about this excursion that they took, this mission they took to the Arctic, and the ship was lost. And there's just like a photo and a couple notes about a certain officer that was on that ship. And she came up with an entire science fiction time travel novel out of just those few pieces of information. And it was really kind of interesting to see how she came up with it. And just a really well-written book. I enjoyed it a lot. Which takes us to staff picks.
Just around the corner from you.
Staff picks are where we recommend something that either just recently came out, such as The Ministry of Time, or something we're anticipating to come out soon. What do you got for us, Chris?
So I went with an old favorite of mine, released a new single. Single's name is The Bridge. The artist's name is Dave House, I believe. He's a Philadelphia artist. He's also in a band called The Mermaid, which I've not listened to. But The Bridge is very much in line with what you expect from him. He's a great songwriter. It's sort of an acoustic piece. It's a little downbeat. I think I recommended for one of our playlists the song called Bricks,
Yeah.
which is about a breakup, shockingly, and it's about building something with the bricks that were left behind from this, basically his relationship, exemplified as a house that broke down with all the bricks scattered everywhere. So The Bridge is similarly downbeat. I'll read at least just the second. It's about a guy who seems to work on a bridge, although I assume that's a metaphor. With every nail that he drove, it drove him further from his own. He's punishing isolation, but the bridge just feels like home. It continues with that theme throughout. It's a really nice song. He's got a great voice. I'm going to try to check out his other band because every time I listen to his stuff, I like it. I just haven't listened to a ton, but I've been listening to at least some of his stuff for a while. Good stuff.
Yeah, cool. I had a completely different staff pick before yesterday at about 6 p.m., where I caught a social media post from, ironically enough, Todd Snyder, who posted, "I've been listening to this album. I can't stop listening to it." So I thought, well, if Todd's listening to it, I should at least check it out. The album is Shades of Blue, which came out, I think, in November of 2024 by Evan Nicole Bell. It's interesting to me because it's recommended by Todd Snyder, and it is nothing like Todd Snyder's music. It is, so I tried to do a little research in the hours in between listening to it last night and recording today. Her voice, she has this cool, husky, sexy, bluesy voice. She's apparently a multi-instrumentalist, plays like 7 or 8 different instruments. She was an internet sensation, so I'm not sure I'm recommending somebody that people haven't heard before, but I'm not sure if our listeners have. She came to the forefront on social media because she recorded herself playing and singing the song Crosscut Saw on YouTube. Look it up, man. It is amazing. She's an amazing player. Her voice is so cool. I've listened to 4 or 5 songs of the album Shades of Blue, and I really like it so far. It's one of those almost genreless type of albums. It definitely mixes. She's got kind of cool, funky R&B approach to some songs. Some stuff sounds like straightforward electric blues. I'm drawing a blank as to a good comparison right now. But her voice is just really, it's like Beyonce level powerful. And I like more of, I've only listened to about half the album so far, and I already like more songs on this album than I did on Beyonce's Cowboy Carter album. And of course, my favorite song from last year came from that album. It's worth listening to. I think you'll like it. She's got serious chops on the guitar, and she's also just kind of cool and sexy, I think. On top of which, I read the bio, graduated from Duke. So
I saw that. I just read the bio. It's cool.
Yeah, I think she's about, I don't know, 27 or 28. She's, so I'd say a recent graduate from Duke, at least compared to, us. So she's young, she's great. I have a feeling we're going to see her a ton. She strikes me as one of those people that your next year's Grammys, you're going to see, best newcomer kind of stuff. She's really good. Shades of Blue, Evan Nicole Bell.
Well, you had me at husky, sexy voice, but you totally nailed it with Duke graduate, so I will check her out. All right, I think Tom and I are starting to get giddy, which means we probably should think about wrapping this up.
Probably. However, we have one more important thing to do, which is pick the next two songs for our third song in season 6 playlist. We try to pick songs that are in accord with the theme of the episode. And in this case, I think we both did a pretty good job. What's your choice for the playlist?
In light of the fact that we just interviewed the play-by-play announcer for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think they might have won a Super Bowl, or 4, or maybe even 5. Bengals have not won a Super Bowl yet, and they were born 2 years after I was. So they're pretty fucking old. They're 56. One of my favorite moments, and I still don't know why, I still like this whole idea of sports teams that we cheer for and how much they influence our moods and everything else. Like, I will get up and yell at the TV, and that's not, like, I'm not that person. Like, at work, I don't ever lose my cool, but I will scream at the TV, like, with some stupid play like what Bengals did. Whatever, I won't get into it.
Still pissing me off.
Yeah. But 1990, I think you might have been there. I was working at the bar when the Reds won the World Series. I was in St. Louis, and rabid Cardinals fans, and everyone was so cool. It was just such a great moment. To this day, I remember, like I said, where I was, what the feelings were, how awesome it was. I mean, because I was alive. I was 10 when the Reds won in 75 and 76, so 9 and 10. Bengals haven't done it, and I thought they had a window and might be getting close. Obviously, they made it to the Super Bowl. So I went with I Still Wait by a band called The O's. I don't think they're around anymore. It's a nice angst-ridden song, not about waiting for the Bengals to win, but going with the title, I went with I Still Wait, because I'm still waiting for the fucking Bengals to win a Super Bowl.
I'm guessing that's a good choice, but you know what? I don't know that song. So I'm looking forward to putting it on the playlist and then listening to the playlist. But it certainly fits the theme. I went a little more kind of straightforward and literal. It's not so personal, except for the fact that I do really like this song. And I'm going to pick the song Joe DiMaggio, Done It Again, from Mermaid Avenue, Volume 2. If our listeners have not listened to the 2 volumes of Mermaid Avenue by Billy Bragg and Wilco, really cool albums. They what happened, as I understand it, and I think Billy Bragg's the one who got the rights to some unpublished, unrecorded songs by Woody Guthrie from the Guthrie family. And I think it was Billy Bragg that got them, and then he invited Wilco to collaborate with them. I don't think Jeff Tweedy was involved in the original acquisition of the songs, but these are all lyrics basically that were sketched out poems, for lack of a better word, that Woody Guthrie had written down but never recorded. And these 2 artists, Wilco, primarily Jeff Tweedy, and then Billy Bragg, sat down and put them to music. And Volume 1 is probably the better of the 2 albums. But Joe DiMaggio, Done It Again is just kind of a fun, you could tell basically Guthrie was a baseball fan, and it was just kind of a fun thing he jotted down that he thought maybe one day he would put to music. So I really enjoyed both of those albums, and I think that's a fun baseball song to add to this playlist.
Nice choice. And I do remember I listened to volume 1. I don't know that I've listened as much to volume 2, but perfect way to wrap up a sports episode where we had the very impressive Rob King, who's the play-by-play announcer for the Steelers. He does work for the Pirates, Pitt, West Virginia, at least in the past. He's also written a fantastic new book, science fiction book, fantasy science fiction book. I encourage our listeners to check it out. All that information will be on our website with references to Rob's material.
Third Song In is recorded in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Joliet, Illinois, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You can email us your comments, your questions at thirdsongin@gmail.com. You can also find our podcast and lots of other content at thirdsonginpodcast.com. There's an episode spotlight. There is an as mentioned page where we will have our links to Rob King's internet presence, including robkingauthor.com, and a link to the Amazon page for his book. Follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, or Apple. Rate us. Please review us. A written review helps. Download the podcast to listen to later while you're working out or whatever it may be. All of those things help us get seen and help us find other listeners. We have a Facebook page, which is Third Song In. You can just search Third Song In. We also are posting our blogs now to Substack, where you can subscribe to us. All those things, again, kind of feed onto each other and help us as podcasters. You can also find our Third Song In Season 6 playlist on Spotify and the other streaming services. It will have 6 songs as of this recording, and we will continue to add 2 songs every episode till the end of the season. We also have a special playlist for this episode, which will include all 10 songs that we picked under the theme of sports. So all the songs that you heard us talk about with Rob will show up on that, and that will also be searchable under the term Third Song In, wherever you listen to your streaming music.
You've been listening to Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek. Thanks for listening.
It is time for a sports guest, and not just a sports guest, but a Steelers guest. Welcome to
suck.
Third